Hi guys, and welcome to a lockdown edition of Darkwood Bushcraft. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine earlier today, and we were talking about the difference between tools and skills, and which was the most important. Whether or not it was important to have an expensive knife, whether a cheap one could do, you know, the sort of thing. So what I thought I'd do today is make a little bit of a film just to demonstrate how you can still work with tools that aren't necessarily designed for the job, but they're the ones that you have with you if you have a little bit of experience and you spend your time practicing with your equipment. So what we're going to do today is we're going to whittle a spoon with a machete. So hang around and we'll see how we get on. So these are the tools that we're going to be using today. Obviously we can't make the bowl of the knife with the machete, so I do have a hook knife that I'll be using for that part, but that's the only part that we'll use the hook knife for. We've got a batten which is pretty easily accessible wherever you are, as long as you've got wood, and of course the machete, which is going to be doing the large part of the work. This is the Darien machete. It's made by Expat Knives, an affiliation of Essie. It's a great little tool, but not really designed for fine carving, so we'll see how we get on. So those are the tools, so without further ado, let's make a start. Okay, so we're going to be using a little bit of hazel for this today, so let's split that and let's see how we get on. So we're going to start by literally battening this through the center of the piece of wood. That's pretty much all we're going to use our batten for. I'm going to use this piece here, and let's make a start roughing out the design. So to start with, I'm just going to work on the lower half, and I'm just going to flatten this out. Now I want to go past this central pith line here. This is quite soft, so I don't really want that as part of my spoon. So as you can see, we're getting past that here into the actual wood itself. Now once I've got past that part, I'm just going to try and level the whole thing off so that we're fairly flat and square. So as you can see, we're starting to lose this pith almost entirely. Now I'm looking this way down the wood currently, and what I'm trying to do is just flatten this whole thing off, because it had a slight twist in it at the initial split. So that's all the pith gone from the center. So now I'm just gently chipping away just to get that as flat as possible in profile. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rough out the spoon shape. Now obviously the spoon has a bowl section and a handle, but I'm not going to start here because we're using quite a big tool. I'm going to put my bowl about here. The reason for that is I'm going to shape my handle first, and with a big tool like this I want to have a fair bit of wood that I can hang on to, so I'm not working right near my fingers, because that would be very silly. So I'm going to bring the neck of the spoon in about here and work my way down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my start point, and rather than try and hack off a big chunk, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put some nicks going down the wood like this. So when I come to take it off, it doesn't run away and split. It stays really where I want to put it. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to ignore this knot for the time being, and I'm going to see how we get on. I may need to do a bit of extra work on the knot just to get Okay, so you get the idea. I'm controlling how much wood I'm taking off by putting those lateral cuts in, so I'm maintaining the shape of my handle the way I want it to be. It's very easy with a big tool to get carried away and take too much off. And of course, as we all know, you can take it off, but you can't put it back on again. So we're starting to get a rough shape for our handle now. And you see how difficult that would have been had we been working up here. I'd have had to use something to hold this in place. So we've got the rough shape for our handle. That's close enough. I'm not going to worry too much about that. I'm going to do the finer work up close. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start shaping the handle. Once we've shaped the handle, then we'll rough the head in and we'll start working on the head. So I'm literally now going to start shaping this handle. Now, one of the things you'll notice that I'm doing is I'm not really moving the tool. I'm pulling with this hand here. And the reason I do that is if the tool's not moving, it can't slip. If I'm whittling with a machete, I'm flailing this thing around, there's all sorts of safety concerns involved there. So most of the work, especially if I'm removing reasonably large slivers of wood, I'm going to be doing with my left hand, pulling it away from the blade rather than pushing the blade away from the wood. It also helps your elbow quite a lot. Now I'm going to choke up on this blade and I'm going to start to use it like a draw knife. So that way I can start to get some of those smaller radiuses in and I get a little bit more control over what I'm doing. Okay, so now the last bit, I'm going to finally shape the bowl and then we'll get up and do some of the finer close work. Okay, so we're starting to build up a bit more of a shape now. So I'm going to start refining my shape. So I'm going to create the external shape of this bowl the way I want it. Now effectively a spoon just has to be something that you can use to shovel your food from your plate to your face, but I want to make this as spoon-like as I possibly can, just really to prove the point. So a bit of symmetry is going to be nice if we can get it. So I'm just going to flatten the bowl down a little bit. Just so that it's even right the way across, and then we can start seeing where our shape is. So we need to come down a little bit more here. Okay, we're starting to get something more or less spoon shaped. So let's take a bit of this bark off and let's start to thin this out a little bit. Obviously you want to be careful at this stage. Again, you don't want to be taking too much off. But we are making a spoon and not a canoe, so don't be too prissy with it. If you actually look at the profile of a spoon, when you get in your drawer, it's actually quite flat. There isn't one of the mistakes a lot of people make when they first start out is they put far too much width here and too much length here. So it ends up looking like a miniature canoe, and you just can't get your mouth into the bowl. So one of the things that I'm doing here as well is I'm always cutting across the grain. So as soon as you start to hit the grain and come outwards this way, you'll start to split it away. So if I'm working on the handle from this direction, from the top down, I work this way up to the point where it starts to spread out, and then I come in and I work this way. That allows you to maintain control and not have too many runoffs. So you notice when I'm putting pressure on with my thumb, I never put it over the blade, it's always to one side. That way, if it was to split, slip and get away from me, I'm not going to cut myself. And obviously it's very, very important to use a sharp tool. What you don't want to be doing is putting excessive amounts of pressure, because then when you slip, that's when things get out of control and that's when you end up injuring yourself. So always make sure your tools are nice and sharp and well maintained. It's actually much safer that way than if they're not. So as much as I can, I'm controlling these cuts either by putting pressure on with my fingers or with my thumb, rather than chopping or doing anything that's using a lot of pressure or a swing that potentially means that I'm just aiming and hoping for the best. And this is all stuff that can be applied to any kind of cutting tool. Like I say, this isn't the optimum tool for the job, but as you can see, at a push it gets the job done. So we're just tweaking it now, just putting on some of the finer points, doing a little bit more gentle work. Okay, so this is where we're at. As you see, it's still fairly crude. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to start to scrape down and use it as a scraping tool just to start to refine the shape a little bit. Again, you want to go across the grain as much as possible. Okay, let's make a start on the bowl. Again, when you're using a spoon knife, you want to go across the grain. And you want to use a scooping motion like you would be scooping ice cream. Pushing against your thumb. So it's that making a fist that gives you all the power in your cut. So there you have it. Not the most beautiful spoon on the planet, but perfectly serviceable, and for the most part carved with a machete. So what's more important? Is it really necessary to always have the right tool, or is it more important to have the skills to use that tool and to maybe transfer them to another tool or a similar tool? I certainly think that experience trumps equipment any day of the week, and the other thing you've always got to remember is knowledge weighs nothing. That's always going to be with you, regardless of what you end up with equipment wise in any difficult situation. You're always going to have your knowledge. So there you go. Hope lockdown's treating you fairly well. Hope you're not having too bad a time of it, and we'll see you next time. Happy trails.